Hello and welcome, you're watching UATV News with me, Ksenia Buhai. Let's start with the latest developments. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken discussed the situation on Ukrainian-Russian border with the Bucharest Nine. This was reported on the website of the United States Department of State. In particular, during telephone conversation, the parties discussed the build-up of Russian troops on border with Ukraine. Blinken stressed that U.S. commitment to efforts to de-escalate the conflict in eastern Ukraine through deterrence and dialogue. The Bucharest Nine the eastern flank of NATO. It includes Bulgaria, Hungary, Latvia, Lithuania, Poland, Slovakia, Romania, Czech Republic, and Estonia.
The Secretary and Foreign Ministers discussed Russia's destabilizing military build-up along Ukraine's border, the need for a united, ready and resolute NATO stance for the collective defense of allies, and transatlantic cooperation on issues of shared concern. U.S. Department of State spokesperson Ned Price from the readout on the website of the U.S. Department of State.
Unconditional support for the sovereignty of Ukraine and its course towards NATO membership. Presidents of Ukraine Volodymyr Zelenskyy and the United States Joe Biden had a telephone conversation. It took place following a conversation between Biden and Putin on December 30th. What had the U.S. President told Zelenskyy and what should one expect from those talks? My colleagues will tell you more.
Telephone conversation between Volodymyr Zelenskyy and Joe Biden lasted more than an hour and a half. The heads of state discussed Ukrainian reforms, the oligarchization, economic and energy challenges, as well as the issues of security. The key topic of the talks was the situation on Ukrainian border. The first international talk of the year with President of the United States proves the special nature of our relations. Joint actions of Ukraine, USA and partners in keeping peace in Europe, preventing further escalation, reforms, the oligarchization were discussed. We appreciate the unwavering support of Ukraine. President of Ukraine Volodymyr Zelenskyy in Twitter. The presidents also discussed diplomatic efforts for the Minsk and Normandy formats. Joe Biden supported the Ukrainian sovereignty and territorial integrity. The negotiations are necessary in general. They show that Ukrainian problems are resolved with the involvement of Ukraine. Our position is heard, and Biden separately noted that nothing about Ukraine will be decided without Ukraine. The main topic of the conversation was security along the Russian-Ukrainian border. Joe Biden assured that the United States and its allies will take decisive measures if Russia starts an invasion in Ukraine. Experts believe that Russia can be disconnected from the SWIFT interbank system. They will also ensure political isolation and impose sanctions against Putin and those in his orbit. America is ready to do this. The question is whether Europe is ready. Therefore, over the past few months, American diplomats have been actively working with the European capitals in order to bring them up to the same level, in order to get their promise, a consent to also support those sanctions. And as far as we understand, there is an understanding that they will also support those sanctions. Despite the support of the international community, Ukraine records an increase in the number of shelling in Donbas. This was stated by head of the Ukrainian President's office, Andriy Yermak. Ukraine and the United States are going to take all possible measures to prevent further escalation. And I want to add that it is extremely important to continue verification work, because we are recording more and more ceasefire violations. Andriy Yermak, head of the office of the President of Ukraine. Following the conversation between Biden and Zelenskyy, meeting of the Ukraine-NATO Commission will soon take place. Also, this week, separate meetings of political advisors to the leaders of the Normandy Four are expected in various formats. Representatives of France and Germany are set to meet with a representative of the Russian side. After that, negotiations with Ukraine will take place. At the same time, German Foreign Minister Annalena Baerbock will discuss Russian aggression against Ukraine with the U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken. The talks will take place on January the 5th in Washington, D.C. Reported by Vadim Kramer and Vlada Tsurkan, UATV News.
Illegal armed groups are strengthening their positions along the contact line. This is reported by the main intelligence directorate of the Ministry of Defense of Ukraine. The agency clarified it goes about additional elements of reconnaissance and snipers. Under the guidance of officers of the armed forces of the Russian Federation, artillery fire control drills are held with the clarification of targets along the positions of joint forces units. The American Boats for Ukraine Safe Boats company showed the process of building the patrol vessels for the Ukrainian Navy. Work is being carried out in Tacoma, Washington. They plan to build 16 boats by March 2026. The published photos show the high degree of readiness of the ships. Water jet engines are installed in the stern, and the hull is equipped with additional equipment. The boat is designed for 10 crew members and 8 passengers. The boat will also be able to reach speeds of up to 83 kilometers per hour. Ukraine expects to receive financial assistance from the European Union. Olga Stefanishyna, Deputy Prime Minister for European and Euro-Atlantic integration of Ukraine, spoke about this. This goes about the 6th EU macro-financial assistance program in the first half of 2022. She said that the Ukrainian side fulfilled all the conditions and received the money in full according to the previous program. The first tranche in the amount of 600 million euros was received by Ukraine in December 2020, the second in October 2021. This is one of the most stable financial programs, allowing to plan the appropriate development spendings each year. Besides, we have also elaborated a certain agreement with the European Union on how to finalize the conditions of getting each tranche of this macro-financial assistance. Olga Stefanishyna, Deputy Prime Minister for European and Euro-Atlantic integration of Ukraine. $107 million of compensation to be allocated to families of passengers of the Ukraine International Airline plane shot down by Iranian military in Tehran in 2020. This was the decision of the Canadian court. The compensation will be divided between the families of the 6 deceased passengers. The court decision does not automatically mean the payment of compensation. The claimant's lawyer said that in order to secure a court decision, he, together with a team of lawyers, will try to impose restrictions on Iranian property in Canada and abroad. In May, a Canadian court announced that the plane had been shot down as the result of an act of terrorism. Iran refused to recognize the court's decision. A passenger plane of Ukraine International Airlines was downed in the suburbs of Tehran on January 8, 2020. All 176 people on board died. Among them were 11 Ukrainians, 90 Canadian citizens and holders of Canadian residence cards, as well as citizens of Iran, Great Britain, Germany, Sweden and Afghanistan. A few days later, Iranian authorities admitted that they had unintentionally shot down a Ukrainian Boeing. Social buses for people living along the contact line. Ukrainian volunteers launch public transport in 57 villages. Yevhen Kaplin, coordinator of the Proliska humanitarian mission, announced this. He said that private carriers have abandoned those routes because of unprofitableness. The cheapest route costs about 1,500 hryvnias, that is some $55, and the most expensive more than 8,000 hryvnias or $300. To get to the hospital, to the post office, or to just get to a pension, residents of settlements along the contact line had to take a taxi.
Those are all villages along the contact line facing the toughest challenges. Namely, there are neither hospitals nor health posts nor other social and administrative services. The transport operators do not go there because it's unprofitable for them. There are no roads there, one shoots from time to time, very few people live there. Besides, 70% of those living there are people on benefits. Yevhen Kaplin, coordinator of the Proliska humanitarian mission.
Starting 2022, all Ukrainians who use the services of mobile operators should connect their SIM card number to their passport data. How will they register new subscribers and how will they identify the existing ones? Our journalist will tell.
Registration of a SIM card with a passport will apply to all mobile subscribers, those who already use the cards and those who are only going to buy them.
subscribers who use the services of a mobile operator will be able to register online and provide passport data until January 1st, 2025. Services will no longer be provided to those who do not pass identification or sign the contract.
Ukrainians support such demands. It is right, so that the number was mine, so that no one else uses it. All over the world, you buy a phone and register a number. Any SIM card that you bought needs your data on the internet anyway. If you are not going to hide your data, then it makes no difference to you.
When you try to sell something on some resource, you are constantly called by scammers who have 10 cards each. If they have a passport which should be presented in order to register the card, it will help, I think, in the fight against frauds.
The main task of the innovation is to protect the personal data of users from fraudsters. After all, a phone number is often used for identification in many services, including banks.
It will be easier for those who use the service numbers for banking services. There are cases when the numbers are stolen. It is because the lack of passport registration, identification, binding of number to the passport, all those make the abuse possible.
When buying a SIM card, not only a passport is required in many countries of the world. To activate a number, one also needs a photo or video confirmation. This is the way they are trying to fight terrorism abroad. Europe has introduced a specific application. One can refuse to submit documents having bought a SIM card. That is, they simply buy a SIM card freely, but when they want to activate the number, they should send their documents and personal data. The mechanism for verifying existing subscribers is still being coordinated. To register in the store, one will need a written application as well as an original passport. One can also bind the number to one's passport online using the electronic digital signature of the bank or the mobile ID. Reported by Vadim Kramer and Svetlana Sich, UATV News.
After a long New Year's weekend in Ukraine, a decline in COVID-19 incidence is recorded. Over the past day, 1,746 new cases of coronavirus have been confirmed. 87 children and 21 health workers fell ill. 135 people died. Most of the infected are in Kyiv city as well as in Kharkiv and Poltava regions. Ukraine introduces a booster dose of COVID-19 vaccine for people over 60. The corresponding order was signed by Minister of Health Viktor Lyashko. The elderly will be able to receive a booster dose at least 6 months after the second. Meanwhile, Ukrainians are already being vaccinated with a third additional dose. It is received by health workers and employees of residential facilities. How does it differ from the booster and what are the rules for administering those jabs? My colleagues have more details.
Alpha, Beta, Gamma, Delta, Omicron are the most well-known and the most common strains of the coronavirus. In total, scientists know more than 1,000 mutations. The third dose of the vaccine, which should help to more easily carry the infection with the changed virus, was provided in many countries back in the summer of 2021. Some residents of the USA, China, Czech Republic, Great Britain, Sweden, France, Slovakia, Austria, Chile and Brazil have already been vaccinated 3 times. Meanwhile, the fourth stage of vaccination has already started in Israel.
Mathematical models are used to predict how will the situation develop, how will the vaccine influence the situation. According to the data obtained, the third dose will provide a higher level of protective antibodies.
As for Ukraine, the third stage of immunization began in mid-December here. It goes about an additional dose. It is recommended for people with HIV, cancer, for patients after organ transplantation, those taking immunosuppressant drugs, and patients with other diseases that affect the immune system. While the booster dose is already being received by doctors no later than 270 days since the second vaccination. It is designated to enhance the effect of the first 2 doses. An additional dose is administered with an interval of up to 3 months after the second vaccination, a booster dose up to 270 days. According to Health Ministry's plan, starting mid-January, a booster dose will become available to all Ukrainians. Among the first, there will be citizens over 60. In the meantime, most Ukrainians are completing course of 2 vaccinations. Winter holidays did not postpone immunization process.
Despite the extra day off, there are still people who want to get vaccinated at the vaccination point located at the Kyiv railway station, but only 9 jabs have been made there during the first 4 hours of work. Some say, and I don't know if it's true or not, that we have to go through 8 doses of vaccine. We'll see. I'm ready for anything.
The booster dose will extend the validity of the COVID-19 certificate for another 270 days, but the additional one will not, because it is indicated for people with low immunity and their body's protective response will increase slightly. Reported by Vadim Kramer and Larissa Zubenko, UATV News.
In the coming days, the weather outside will not resemble the winter in Ukraine. Forecasters predict about 0 temperatures and rains in almost all regions of the country. However, it will get colder before Christmas, they note. By the end of the week, the temperature is expected to fall to up to -9 degrees Celsius. The danger of avalanches persists in the Carpathian Mountains. Heavy rains with sleet are expected in the coming days as well. That's all for today. More updates on our official website, YouTube, Facebook and Twitter pages. Stay healthy and take care of yourselves.